Okay, so it's finally happening. We've got Pali Summerlin on the island of Maui. She's gracing us with our presence, truly. And I'm really excited to be able to have a conversation with her and really to share her with everybody anyone who's listening or interested. So we're just going to talk a little bit about her life and the work that she does and what she offers. I've known her and have talked with her and been sort of a student of hers for, gosh, years. And I can certainly say, wonderful years. Certainly say it's the best thing going. I really think she's the best kept secret that I just want to start sharing. So maybe, well, here she is, Pali Summerlin. Do you want to start out with anything, or maybe just a little bit of?
Well, it's not anything that I try to make happen. I don't try to make anything happen, but this is such a great invitation from you, and the chance to really update, because I think the last interview I had may have been 7 years ago. So it's lots has changed, and but the most foundational thing has never changed, and that's the space that I offer to people that are in response, and it's always so dear to me. People like you who love the truth, and together we find it. It's hard for me to talk about a past. I think I would call it the parables of Pali, or the parables of Pauline, strapped to the railroad track. And
so you were a regular person who had a few sons and
had a regular life. Yeah, the reason I'm here on Maui right now is because I have an 80th birthday that everybody's got to show up for. Yeah, so 8 decades leaves you with what could be called history. What happens after you're not attached to outcome, after you're not attached to getting or avoiding anything, after you've begun to love the movement of life as you, is that all of that history takes on less weightiness, It's not that I can't remember it, it's just that I don't have any attachment to it, and I don't have a lot of emotionality but it was a good story. Yeah.
And that experience, I guess, would be the case of someone who has sort of woken up or experienced enlightenment, if you will, or just realizing that you're not the person, you're not the body, right. Your awareness, your beingness. Right. So that's...
Yeah, what happened here in this Pali lifetime was happening to a person until that person was gone. When it's happening to a person, it's what we call personal, right? It's like, I took that very personally. So you have the kinds of experiences that leave you feeling bewildered or hurt or rejected. And what happens when you see that you're not a person, it's like you've been handed a script and you've been playing that role, but the first thing that happens is that there's a little bit of space around that. It's like it's not so heavy. It's like what you and I call lightening the load. Yeah. It's not so like on you. It's not like happening to you. It's like this is life happening, and that increases. And at some point, the last little filaments of what tie you into suffering just simply fall away like a spider web. It sort of dries up and falls away. And at that point, you know yourself as life happening. It's not happening to you. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily happening through you. It's all of a piece. And it's in that, that's where the language like oneness comes from. That's the language of when the self-judgment falls away, then you're not separated from others or what's happening by judgment. It's just what's happening.
Yeah, or caught in the filter of the I-ness, the me-ness. Right. I can so vouch for my experience of what you just said about having space. I mean, it's a funny word to use, but it's really the best word.
It's the best word, yeah.
There's space in between
Right.
what's happening and my experience of it
Right.
suddenly. So it's not like I'm glued to this reaction of this Elizabeth person who can get hurt, who can get offended, who can get blamed. It isn't existing. It's a life happening, and there's the space between. Yeah. Anyway, it's.
And the interesting thing about the word space, because there are a couple of analogies that spiritual teachers that we're all familiar with use that have to do with awake awareness is the space in which everything shows up. I am that space, you know, or awake awareness as the sky with weather moving through it. You know, the sky is always pristine. The sky is always, no matter what goes through it, even with climate change, right? No matter what goes through it, it's still sky. It's like the spaciousness. And then that starts to be, first, it's like in your case now, you know it as an expanded experience, right? But at some point, the idea of whatever is going on falls away, and you just are that. That's just a feeling of it, because that's our true nature. That's the space that I am, that you are. That's what we share. That's what is pointed to as oneness. It's not that it's not varied and exciting and moving and happening. It's just not other. It's not something that's like you said, it's not happening to you. You know, so it's like, it's the most fun you can have. Waking up is, I highly recommend it. It's the most fun you can have.
And you are, would you call yourself a coach? Speaking of waking up and you facilitating that process, you're available for that and very, very good at it, I might add. Is that what you would call yourself, a sort of a mentor, coach?
A coach seems to be the best word because it describes, as you know, you bring to me wherever you are with anything, and together we look at the best option for you to open up a larger space, that word again, and to see how there's more space and there's not so much press. So it is a coaching activity. I think that's a great word for it, like a consciousness coach. I think that's what I put on some things. But fundamentally what's happening is that you're literally becoming lucid in a bad dream of separation. And it's with that understanding that all of what we do together is contextualized. It's like that, the bad dream is the context, because that's where, if you incarnate into this reality of separation, you're caught in a bad dream. And just as in a nighttime dream, if you become lucid in a nighttime dream, you know the experience of how the dream changes because you're aware that you're dreaming. And that's kind of the first step that happens here. You can't quite be had by it if you have the context that it's a dream. Yeah. So, and then the coaching starts there with whatever's going on that still feels sticky or weighty or suffering. You know, the point is to not suffer. Life was not created for suffering.
And I would say too that it might behoove us to play with the idea that it's a dream. I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, gosh, in my more conservative moments, that would sound pretty woo-woo and abstract at best.
Yeah.
So you can certainly play with the idea. Like, I wonder if this is just my my story, my ill perception right now, and just loosen up on what you think is going on.
Create more space. Yeah, to experience and to consider. It's the analogy to a nighttime dream is so precise because you know that when you go to sleep at night, you could have a whole Cecil B. DeMille, that's dating me, isn't it? A Cecil B. DeMille production with 10,000 players, right? But all of it's in your mind. You're still in your bed. You know, the marauding hordes from the east have not come into the bedroom. So you have this experience of the mind as this immense space in which reality shows up. That analogy to a nighttime dream, you see, we think that this is reality because we think that we are awake. But we're awake, we are aware and awake to a total distortion of our true nature. We're such powerful creators that when we believe something, even if it's not true, it creates an entire reality. So, you know, not to get into the radical nature of reality, but that's where I tend to go, as you know. If you believe something, that's the information that begins the process of the projection of a reality. This is an information reality. It's a digital reality. It's a projection. It's a virtual reality. And with the belief, like this precious little Elizabeth, 4 or 5 years old, had her feelings hurt, and she believed, I'm not doing it right. I'm not good enough. And that was like binary computer code that got inserted into the mainframe, and now you have a life. Because that's at cause in the matter, that code, that frequency actually. Language clothes frequency, but frequency creates realities.
Yep, and knowing that, that's where the undoing, that's where you have a toehold or a grab into undoing.
That's exactly
Just what you said, and I think that's what my experience is, largely what you and I have done together, which is to just undo those belief systems.
Exactly.
Basically, they're actually creating a reality, to reuse that term again.
Yeah, and the really good news is that when we conclude something, and there's no way to overstate the power of belief. I mean, it literally creates a reality. It's pervasive throughout your experience as a polarity. I mean, if I have the belief I'm not good enough, I'll probably assert at some point along the way that I'm better than you. Because the other end of that stick, of that belief, is still at play.
Interesting.
Yes.
And then game on, as you said,
Exactly.
because it gets you in a whole mess of things.
Totally.
I've had a lot of sort of moments over the past months of the old me, like having a circumstance come up, and then the old me probably would have, taken a little stick and kind of messed with what was happening. Believing something, I'm offended, oh gosh, now I need to make a comment on, pushed a button over there and another, and then before you know it,
Yeah.
there's
It's a
pattern.
Yeah, because it has the power of complexity that comes from fear. And whenever we're using an idea about ourselves to try to get something or avoid something, or to try to control, which is another version of getting something, then we're doing exactly what you were just describing, is that we're inserting some need for control, or some need for a different kind of results. And then we see that times 7 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bad dream. It's a very bad dream. Yeah. So the access, the beautiful thing about projection, which is what we do when we repress our belief, our conclusion that we're not good enough, we immediately repress that because it breaks our heart. There's something in us that knows it's not true, right? And so it's a kind of an abandoning of ourselves, and so it gets repressed, and anything that's repressed gets projected. So now we have a reality that's informed by the thing that we concluded that broke our heart. Energetically, what we did was we left ourselves. We were talking earlier about what it means to be on your own side. At the level of creating, being against yourself, was this belief by a child who had no choice. And so the movement of all the work we do is toward radical self-acceptance, towards seeing, towards forgiving. Seeing that what you believed was unavoidable. It was never true, and it's happened to every single person that you will see or know. The very ones that you think caused your own pain are the ones who had their own experience of pain and abandonment, of self-abandonment. So the work is very close, it's very personal. Yeah.
True, and very moment to moment with what's relevant.
Exactly.
With the person.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, for me, a lot of these concepts, we're concepts.
Right.
You know, we're just large and vague, and as time went on with hearing you use those terminology, well, it's just become clear to me. I mean, I'm understanding why the terminology is used. I said, wow, that's exactly what's happening.
Right.
Just exactly what you're saying.
And it's through your experience that you recognize that, and you understand conceptually what we're doing. But the reality of what we're doing is the most intimate. It's the closest thing. It's you coming home to yourself on your own side, right? And it's that's where life actually begins, because that's when you do what we refer to as wake up. You wake up out of the bad dream of suffering and illusion at the simple, heartbreaking conclusion of a child, I'm not good enough, and realize the impact that that has in terms of experience. So it's an amazing process, and it's the opening into the happy dream. It's the opening into what in religious terms they call heaven on earth. Because the suffering stops when you are no longer held by your own projection that you experience as being against you.
And how would someone know how the heck to do that? You know, not being aware that I'm projecting, just knowing that I'm suffering, perhaps knowing that I get myself into many patterns, like being rejected often, or finding myself in debt, you know, or having certain out of control behaviors. I mean, where does a person go from knowing something's off, sensing there's freedom available? I mean, where would one start?
No, there's so many teachers around now. You know, so many amazing teachers of non-duality, which is at the core, the heart of this teaching. And they all go about it in slightly different ways. What I found that works with the people who are attracted to working with me, and that you can trust that. You know, if you're a Muji person, that's where it's going to open for you. If you're a Rupert Spira person, there's so many teachers now. This is what technology is doing. Technology actually replicates consciousness. That's why there's so much available to us, because consciousness is opening. You know, in the Indian tradition, we'd be talking about this being the end of a 5,000-year Kali Yuga, which was years of suffering and war and pestilence and all of that, right? And there's a way for that to be, in a certain sense, we can feel an ending to a cycle, and the opening out of that cycle depends on technology and the experience of picking up a phone. And I do sessions with people in Europe and Thailand, all over the world, because of this technology, and our consciousnesses are connected. We're literally having an experience of what's called oneness through the technology. Because human beings are using it and they're all wounded, it has such a huge downside. But the true nature of what's being offered shines through that.
Just being connected to everything, almost an immediacy to information, or immediacy to events.
Yeah, but people can find so many teachers. If you're wanting to wake up, if you felt that most people who are on a spiritual journey, the biggest problem they continue to have is that they're on a spiritual journey.
The switching.
Because you can, I did that for 70 of my now 80 years, right? So I thought I was on a spiritual journey, so I didn't have to understand and see and unwind my mind out of its contraction.
Do you think the work that you did do, which was quite a lot of things, Avatar and just gosh, many things, do you think that led up to these sort of...
Well, I think there's a way in which you're going to be interested in it or not. I don't know that the work, so many teachers will say it doesn't have anything to do with meditating or the path or anything like that. There's a way in which I don't quite buy that, because I feel that, because if the desire, I know what the desire in my heart was for the truth. And I know that I got distracted by being a seeker, and I did spiritual bypasses out of that. So that now I think that all of that helped me to be the space in which waking can happen. Not as a person, but as awareness. You know? So I think it doesn't matter, actually.
And if it's cumulative, then it's cumulative.
Exactly.
I mean, it feels sort of cumulative to me if I was to answer the question. And I know that I had done a lot of Byron Katie work,
Right.
Which I feel like just really moved major stuff out of the way to arrive talking with you and you know, being just more available to what you had going on.
Yeah, and Katie's contribution as a teacher to understand the way that the mind gets hold, and just that you're looking at it, you know, to get your mind on paper and have the experience of witnessing it. Her contribution is it's beyond estimate. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, I wonder. I mean, it does seem to me that the bulk of our suffering is mind identification.
That's exactly right. That's right.
So wow, I mean,
yeah. What does she say? The worst thing that ever happens is a thought. It's true. Like if we're sitting here right now, and all of a sudden you get a thought about a concern that you have, then that's going to be static in the field between us, and you're going to be distracted, right?
Yeah.
And then that's what suffering is, right?
Yeah. And that's just a little thing. What if I really started thinking I could, you know, I had to get up now. I've got to get up now. I have a belief system that's got me into big trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mind is just think about what we talked about earlier, that conclusion of a child, I'm not good enough, or I did it wrong, that was a thought that child had. And then they believed that thought, and then it created an entire lifetime of suffering, real suffering. Because when you look at this collectively, if you look at the need for control held in political or governmental bodies, it all comes from that. It's, you know, I'm the least one to want to be simplistic, but this is not a difficult, complex understanding. We've all experienced it. We know it. All of our hearts have been broken. Yeah. And we will look out and not understand why. And that's the answer to that is that you believe something that was not true, and you can forgive yourself because you're not good enough. You're everything. You're the space in which realities arise. Try that one on.
Well, a quiet mind knows that, I would say.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
So would you say that the work you do with people, that piece is the basic parts of it, which is to undo the thinking, the wounds are really maybe where the thinking gets born or gets the recipe is there.
Right, exactly.
So that's kind of what that's the thrust of the work that you do.
Right, and to, you know, I think David Hoffmeister has a line that describes it: unwind the mind back. It's like we're unwinding something that's been going on in the way that we would talk about it, an ancient wound of sorts. But we're unwinding the mind out of being externally referenced. And this is a phrase that I use because this is what happens when the child, when we incarnate into this bad dream reality. It's already happening. But the child has the experience of believing something, I'm not good enough. Then all of a sudden, he's magnetized into the external, where he's looking for, how do I be good?
And when you say magnetized, you mean your attention all goes there. Is
Exactly,
that right? Okay.
Exactly, excellent. Yeah, the attention is the aspect of consciousness that's used to engage you. Attendere, it's like you're extended, you're pulled into something. And when the frequency, the energy of I'm not good enough is informing the identity, then everything that's seen out here, everything that attracts your attention is going to be that. And so you're pulled out there, and you can't, there are no answers out there.
But that's where we're looking for them.
Out there's a projection.
Yeah.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah. I forget, I think it's Bentinho Massaro, or maybe lots of people have talked about the mirror. We were trying to wipe off the mirror.
Right. You look in the mirror and your hair's a mess, so you clean the mirror?
Yeah, maybe you say it. Maybe you're the one who says it.
Right.
Yeah.
We continue to deal with what looks like where the problem is. Yeah.
And I'm still to this day many times sure that that's what the problem is, and you are quick to remind me.
Right.
And again, it's the coming home to it's I forget the words you use. It's just taking mind off, thinking it's that, and just coming home to self and just working it out here. You know, what do I want? What am I experiencing? Is there a wound that's kind of running the show?
Yeah, that's the greatest relief ever, is to not be magnetized into the apparent external world, because then you're free. You're not trying to get anything or avoid anything, and you're at cause. You're as source in the matter, and it's all for you as one with what is. Because you see that simple little conclusion, I'm not good enough, it carries the frequency of fear, and it's the judgment that you then, when you project it, is slapped onto everything you see, whether it's a person or a circumstance or whatever. So that little judgment, self-judgment, it has to be cleared up here, but you can start by coming, like you're talking about, we come back to this. Like, if I didn't have that, I'm not good enough here, this would still be happening, but what would it look like then?
Yeah. And how can I just set aside, how can I assume I have the I'm not good enough, but set it aside and practice not wanting
Perfect.
or avoiding.
Exactly.
I mean, what a practice that is.
Absolutely.
Even just for an event, even just for an hour.
Yeah, just for that intersection. I work with people sometimes now. I don't know that you and I have done any version of this work, but it's like I was working with I think my son about money or something. If you're just doing what's in front of you to do, say it's a budget or that it's some indebtedness or whatever it is, and it's not, you don't have a story going on about it, and you don't have the reason that this is a problem because I'm not good enough. In other words, if I was just doing your finances for you, this is why accountants are so free, right? It's not personal. You can easily just take care of business. But the minute that you've got all these bills and you believe that you've been bad, that you should never come to debt, and now you don't know, you've got all the story going on. The suffering comes with the story, not with the thing itself. The thing itself is neutral, right? Yeah. A lot of freedom there.
Okay, we're back with the final segment of Pali Summerlin, the best kept secret coming out. I want to talk about belief systems, because I think so many modalities will tell you that it's what we're believing that's the problem. Mind identification, what our thinking is. So what I love to really take a look at is we can tell if we're suffering, it's because of a belief system. So if we want to know what our belief systems are, the ones that aren't working, just take a look at your life. If you want to know what those problem beliefs are, take a look at your life. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Right. Well, one of the little keys is if you're feeling something that you don't want to experience, you're believing something that's not true. That's a kind of a little, that's not exactly a quote from Byron Katie, but that's a kind of the direction of her work. So if you're looking, suffering is a great tool, because if you're not feeling good, there's something, the place where that gets corrected is at the level of belief, not at the level of the external. That's why people make jokes about moving the furniture around on the deck of the Titanic. The iceberg is the problem, the deck of the Titanic is not the problem. So if you start to have the experiences that you don't want to have, in that moment with just a deep breath and an acknowledgement of what's really going on here, right? One of the things that's occurred to me lately is that it's like the human condition, the idea of being a human, of being in this world, is contextualized by one problem after another. It's like people don't even feel as if they're engaged in aliveness unless they're solving a problem. Whether it's what are we going to have for dinner, or what are we going to do about school for our university graduate. It's like everybody feels that their mind has to be engaged in solutions, or they're not of value. Life is valuable, life is happening, life is alive and well, but we take ourselves out of the experience of it with our mind caught up in problem solving. There are not very many problems to solve, and most of them don't get solved by worrying about them, right?
Would you say that happens because of the sort of fundamental position of the ego, which is this,
Yes.
This isn't it.
Exactly, perfect.
There's a problem.
Yeah, it's the way that it should be, and this is not it. And then the caveat that everybody loves it must be your fault.
Because
It's
we
somebody's
want to
fault.
send it outward, we want
Right.
to project it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And if only you were different, or if you were not engaged in this, this wouldn't be a problem. But people feel compelled. They believe that their meaning and that their purpose comes from solving problems. And you can see it in every arena of life. The whole thing is one problem after another. Now, underneath the idea that there's a problem is the fundamental fear. And underneath that fundamental fear, collectively, is the individual fear of not being good enough, as an example. It's a fear-based self-concept. What fear does is it creates complexity. And so we have one weighty system after another, whether it's the justice system, or the Congress, or the city council, or whatever is needed. The complexity comes from fear, and what fear will lead to is a need to control, which creates more complexity. So it's like a toppling over weight, and I think that's what people are experiencing in this collective reality now, is that there's something that's fundamentally it's all at risk somehow. There's a fundamental piece that's a distortion, and that's what's coming into the light for individuals. Just in this way that you're talking about, right? If you want to know what you're believing, if you want to know what you're believing, look at what you're getting. Not to blame yourself, but to find out how it correlates.
Right, not to blame, just simply to awaken to
Right.
And maybe some examples, kind of on a real simple level, would be like if you get rejected, maybe you're in relationships where you're continually rejected in the end. So that would be just sort of a kind of an obvious example of I'm not good enough.
Right.
And there's just so many different ways that we have a life called our life, but yet we don't realize it's actually orchestrated by our belief systems.
Perfect. Exactly. And you'll never, and because circumstances can look so different, each one looks like it's a unique version of being rejected. So that if I'd only been a little bit nicer, or if I'd been more assertive, or if I'd been more there, or if he'd been a little more into me, whatever it is, but it's still the same experience of being rejected, because cause in the matter was that conclusion. I'm not good enough, or I'm not the one. Yeah. So, it's sometimes I'm astounded at the fundamental way in which we do create our own reality. It's not in the same way that I think The Secret or even Abraham Hicks would have us believe, because an ego can't get good enough to make that outcome consistent. But what you can see is you can see through the cause, the conclusion that the ego made that created the suffering, and that can be corrected. That can be forgiven. And it's in that we don't have to create a reality. Life is alive and well, and it's happening.
Right. It's going to still keep happening.
It
It just won't be
It's not going to be
burdened
limited.
by our,
Perfect.
yeah,
It's not going to be
limited.
limited by your belief and your insistence that, I mean, when you believe that you're not the one, as a woman, there's not a man on the earth that could convince you that he was sincere about you being the one.
And if he says it, you probably won't hear
You
it.
sure you won't believe that?
Right? Yeah. I just wanted to share something you said a little while ago. You gave an example of we find the problem here. We have a wound here, and then we tend to project, what we're not willing to sort of look at or what we're resisting as a belief system, which we think is real. We're projecting it out there. And since I have a lot of more space these days with my experience of what's happening and my interactions with people, I actually watch my mind. I'll actually watch, like I'll have an interaction, and then I watch this discomfort occur, which is because it's hit the wound, I'm now triggered, and then the mind just goes, oh, but I bet it's him. Like it starts to make this little, not little, I mean, it could turn into the whole thing. I just start to blame.
Right.
It's just what was not there at all before. Start to be, he is kind of insecure, and he probably was really having these certain kind of motivations. Forget it. I'm just gonna, it's amazing, and that's all just the projected fear.
Right, and that's when, if you have the space in there, or the little check mark, I call it the reality check, you can realize that you want all of it for yourself, because if it is about him, there's no way to correct it.
So the good news is
the good news is that it's all right here. I have total access to what's causing the matter of this, right? And it starts to be such it's amazing grace, really.
And that's what you're such a gift, because you'll remind me. I'll say, well, I think this is maybe what's happening. That's all self-judgment, honey. That's all that is, and it's looking like that, And it's true, because I know, if it doesn't feel true, I know it's true. I trust your perception.
Well, you've had the experience of seeing through it and seeing what yourself as causing the matter, and then how that changes in interaction. You've had that experience. You know it.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the word trigger, and that's a fundamental way in which we are reminded of the wound. Being triggered is like gold. You want that to happen, because that feeling that you have when you're triggered will take you directly into an experience as a child when you concluded something about yourself that was never true, but that's been informing your experience from that point on. So being triggered is like the best news of all. When I work with people and they say, well, I'm not nearly as triggered as I used to be, I'm saying, don't avoid being, if you're triggered, go for it. It's good news. It's good information.
Well, we have some questions from your fan base.
All right.
I think there's a couple good ones here. It's 2019 when you got to put your glasses on and you got to go to your phone for the questions. Let's see. Well, we sort of addressed this, but I think it's worth reading. She asks, what are the 2 essential questions we can ask ourselves in any given moment when we're not feeling good? 2 essential questions.
Okay. Well, the first one leads, the most important one is the second one. But you start off in a situation where you're not feeling good. It's like, things just aren't okay. There may be something specific. But in this situation, you ask yourself the question, what am I wanting? What do I want? Right? And whatever arises, the next question is, if I had that, what I'm saying that I want, like more attention, right? What would I be experiencing? And that's when you get closer into yourself with that question. And if I have more attention, what I'm going to be experiencing maybe I'll feel more worthwhile. I'll feel like I'm important. And that's when noting that what you're wanting to experience is more meaning, more importance, that you, say you're contributing or that you can identify with, then that's when you know that leads you, that's the trigger, back to the childhood wound.
Mm.
But you can also say to your little girl, the child, you're not just important or unimportant, you're everything. You know, you can use it as an opportunity, reminding yourself what you're wanting to experience takes you back to the wound where you took it away from yourself, actually. So what the questions do is that they use whatever's going on to engage you with yourself on the inner level. And that's where there's some real there.
Yeah, interesting. Because that's where things are emanating from.
Yeah,
in a sense.
exactly. You're back at cause in the matter.
It seems even to ask that question is a kindness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
Nice. Okay. We also got asked, why is radical self-acceptance so important on this journey? And maybe talk about what radical acceptance
Right. Well,
is.
what we were just talking about in some way refers to it. But at the theoretical level, when you reject yourself, like I'm not good enough or I'm not important, when that's a self-rejection. And that's what leads us to, it's a self-rejection that we then project on the external reality. It's like I said before, that conclusion is such an unkindness to ourselves. It's not true. It is unavoidable in the metaphysics that we use, which is that this is a bad dream reality. So the conclusion is unavoidable, but that is such a rejection of ourselves. In that whole little scenario of being a child who's dealing with parents and siblings and believes something about, like, I'm not important, right? What we're doing is that we're doing the opposite of self-acceptance. Right? We're rejecting ourselves. We're believing that we should be different than we are. So we're not self-accepting. If in the areas where we might have a problem with family or parents, and we didn't conclude something like I'm not good enough, because it just didn't work for us to conclude that. It's like you took the last cookie and you're like, well, that's what I always do. I get the last cookie, but you're not rejecting yourself about it, right? So, but the things that we do reject, like I'm not good enough, or I'm not important, that's what creates the bad dream reality. Right? So radical self-acceptance, when you come back to yourself, the way we're talking about, and the process that we use is through forgiveness. But you can also do it by being kind to yourself, like we were saying. The reason that radical self-acceptance is so important is that we created this entire suffering reality through self-rejection.
And it's perhaps just, I can imagine not understanding that or not believing that. I mean, even now for me, it's sort of an abstract concept.
Right.
And I think it's sort of safe just to assume that that's what happened in the process of the wounding, in the process of, being born here, and go from there. Kind of go from,
Right. It's kind of like if you need a theory. I was the kind of mind that needed theories. I've always been interested in the dogma and in the conditioning. I'm always interested in the theory. I found that A Course in Miracles was the only spiritual tradition that gave an answer to why, if God is love, there is suffering. And that's what I wanted to know. And that was very meaningful for me. So it gives a lot of answers, but it's just like you said. One of the things that's going on throughout the population is this idea of self-care, right? Well, you can't self-care yourself back into enough spa days and manicures and pedis and whatever to have radical self-acceptance. Radical self-acceptance comes with you telling yourself the truth and being on your own side. And doing it even when you're afraid that you're going to offend somebody or that you're going to make a mistake. It's like you're taking that little girl's hand and you're saying, we've got this, sweetheart, and we're fine. It takes authenticity, and it takes presence, it takes being there. And it takes feeling the fear and choosing yourself anyway. But it is a road back, and that's why. It's because our identity is in self-rejection, the ego identity. So radical self-acceptance is coming out of that illusion.
So it's sort of a homecoming.
It is, yeah, that's lovely, I love that. Coming home to yourself.
Nice. Really, where I would want to go next, but I feel like it's just such a large thing, is because then there's the non-person. I mean, it's sort of like you have to come home to self and then and heal child, and then let all that concept go in the end. So
right. Yeah, that's sort of a different conversation, but it actually doesn't need to be addressed, because if you do this, that's already there. And it's of interest always, and it's of curiosity. I was curious, but it's moot in a certain way.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Great.
Got that one. To be continued.
Yeah, Pali Summerlin.